everyone, to the Scaling Smart podcast, where we bring together thought industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators to discuss key insights, strategies, and experiences that have driven success both for themselves as well as their customers. I'm Billy Mitchell, your host, and today I'm excited to introduce a special guest, Tyson Mao. He's the CEO and co-founder of Tobico Data, which is a next-generation data transformation platform helping teams optimize SQL workflows by making pipelines intelligent, state-aware, and dramatically more efficient. And yes, I had to read that because that is a lot. Tyson, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I like to start off with is just get setting the foundation. We've got three primary topics to go through. We're going to talk about you and your organization, how you got to where you're at. We're going to talk about your industry, your ideal customer, and then kind of in the meat and potatoes of how have you been growing and scaling your organization, what's worked, what's not worked. So I'm excited to jump into talking about your organization because even me, who I'm relatively knowledgeable of your space. I'm by no means an expert, but I am really excited to learn more about exactly what you do. So if you don't mind, let's start right here with your organization. Give us a 90-second overview. And if you go over, it's okay, don't worry. But a 90-second overview of what you do and why you guys do it.
Sure. So if you've heard of the letters ETL or ELT, we're the T, the transformation. So what is data transformation? At companies, you collect a bunch of data about what your users are doing, and you collect that data because you want to answer questions. Generally, any question you want to answer exists in that data, but you need to do some math to that data to get it to a point that where you can answer whatever it is that you want. That might mean joining data from multiple tables, multiple sources, doing some multiplication or whatever it is, some aggregations. That step is called data transformation. When you do that step repeatedly, things can happen, right? So, tables can depend on other tables. You might need to rerun the data for the latest day's worth of data. Our platform helps make all those processes more efficient, and we automate a lot of the processes that are necessary to make sure that these things run correctly.
Okay. So if I understand correctly too, I was looking at your website. A lot of the process that you are working through is recognizing if data has changed also. Can you dive a little bit into that or help me correct me on that?
Yeah, sure. I think data changing is one thing, but it's really think about this data ecosystem, right? So yeah, if I might have a table of data, right? And I might use that table of data and a different table of data to make a third table of data. You can see at a large organization, you would very quickly end up with a web, this gigantic tree of tables, right? And so one example here is if you make a change to a column in one table, do you need to change other tables downstream, right? Because you've changed your data there. Um, Without our software, you would need to kind of know, hey, this column is going to affect those tables, or you have to just rebuild everything, which is kind of the naive way to do it. Now,
Hmm.
our software, our platform, we can automatically build out the lineage, the column level lineage, and we will go and tell you and refresh the necessary tables for you. If you add a column, you don't need to refresh anything downstream, right? Because it's a completely new thing. But if you modify a column, things downstream might change. So that's just one example of something that we do, right? Another example is, let's say you have a table and you want to update the last day's worth of data. The description that you gave in our column, sorry, the description that you gave in our about our company used the word state aware. And so that's one of the main defining features of our platform is that we know the state. We know what's happened in the past, and so we can very easily just refill the last day's worth of data. If you don't have state, you'd have to rescan everything to know where to pick up again.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, that's sounds very intelligent. Like in a very intelligent process for organizations. So let's step back for 1 second. How did you get to this spot? Before starting the recording, we were talking about working at Google and a few other things, but tell us a little bit about you and your journey to get to the point where you are starting this pretty amazing company.
So I would say I've always wanted to do a company, and I'm from the Bay Area, and so just growing up in this area, just living here, you see a lot of people starting companies. At some point, you kind of feel like, hey, that guy did it, I think I can do it too, right? And I would say over the last 15 years, I've had a whole bunch of different ideas. And certainly 15 years ago, my ideas were not that good. Um, and so I'm glad that I've waited to start a company. I was last at Google, um, and I left Google to start this company. But the inspiration for this company actually came from our CTO, and the CTO is actually my brother. We have a third co-founder as well. So my brother's name is Toby. He also lives in the Bay Area, and then we have a third co-founder, Yaroslav, who's out in Orange County. But Toby was working as a data engineer. He had worked at Netflix, where he built a project called SQL Glot, and then went over to Airbnb, where he worked on Minerva. Minerva is Airbnb's metrics platform. And our original idea was to open source Minerva and start a company off of that project. You can kind of look at what Astronomer has done with Airflow, and what Preset has done with Superset. And I know that your audience is probably not data centric, so these are maybe a
It's all
bit,
right.
yeah, it's okay. There's a model for this
We're
type of
following.
data.
We're following. Yep.
That was our initial idea. But when we were looking at the metric space, which is what Minerva did, we saw a couple things. First is that there were two other companies that were trying to do things in this space, and they weren't doing that well. So we weren't sure that the world was ready for this. And then second, more importantly, we didn't the hard part of metrics in our opinion was the transformation, right? Metrics is basically, hey, a system to manage a definition of what is revenue, what is a daily active user, right? But in order to do that stuff well, you have to have a good transformational foundation.
Hmm.
And that's why we started looking at the transformation space. When we looked into the transformation space, right now the market is dominated by one competitor. That company is called DBT. DBT Labs. They're based out of Philadelphia, but they're a remote company. And when we looked at when we got a demo of their tool, we saw that it was quite naive. It didn't hold state. Any change that you made, it would rebuild the entire database.
Wow.
Um, and so Toby was getting a demo at Airbnb, and the person giving the demo said, just at this point, you do dbt run and they'll rebuild your database. And okay, maybe that works at a Series A company, but you can't do that at Airbnb.
Right.
So Toby had an opinion about how to build a system that would scale to companies at the size of Airbnb or Netflix, and so that's why we started the company.
That's awesome. Um, Man, there's a lot of areas that I want to dive into, but they're going to be later on. So
Of course.
let's go into who your ideal customer is. Obviously, we've talked a bit about startups, but we're also talking about large organizations. I would assume there's a play into both markets, but if we were to bring you a customer today, who would it be? What do they look like? And yeah, give some characteristics.
So I'm happy to give some characteristics, but I'm also going to say that this is the core question that I think a startup has to answer, right? Is who do you think your ideal customer is? Because you might think you know the answer to this, but that it can definitely change over time. In
Yep.
terms of who I think my ideal customer is today, I think it's a customer who serves data as a product to its customers, right? So, what's an example here? If you think about some of these uh, like crypto reporting companies, right?
Hmm.
Just as an example, right? The customer, their product offers data to
The
their
end user.
customers, right?
Yeah.
And when that happens, right, then your data transformation is an integral and very critical part of your business. So inefficiencies or pains in that process, either because you built your own solution and it's crude, or you're using something like DBT, which is inefficient and painful, those pains become serious enough that it's worth looking at something like us. So I think finding those types of companies where the product serves data to its customers is ideal for us. Um, if we talk about size, right? Certainly, uh, our solution offers more efficiency, so both in cost and in time and productivity. So the value of that efficiency is more as you go up, in terms of organization size. But then there is a cost on the procurement process as you go into the enterprise size. So if I had to put a size on it, I'd say probably 500 to 5,000.
Yeah. So, and then I think that's a really good leeway into your competition. Obviously, you brought DBT up. So, how busy is this industry? And I can sense that, or rather, I'm extracting that some of the challenges or issues you're solving for your customers are obviously probably reliability, efficiency, which then has both probably energy and manpower savings. Um, Tell us a little bit about your industry, how competitive it is, and how are you guys standing out in serving those customers?
I think the industry, I don't think the industry is that competitive in the sense that there aren't 10 different companies trying to do this thing right now, right? I would say in terms of the players in the space, it's really DBT is the main modern solution. They've been around for I think about 8 years, and they're really the the de facto standard. Um, and so that's probably one of our main sources of competition. The other source of competition is, companies existed before DBT and they built their own solutions, right? And so it's convincing those companies that they should go with people like us, experts in the area, who've built a solution rather than trying to maintain your own solution. Um, yeah, and sorry, what was the second part too? What you
No,
asked?
it's okay. Yeah, just talking about the industry as a whole, the competition that you've got, and then how you guys are standing out amongst that and solving those problems for your customers.
Yeah. So in terms of how we stand out, I think there's two main things that we do differently from DBT. One is this idea of semantic understanding, right? I give this analogy. It's not perfect, but I'm going to use it. So if you've written code, or if you've ever written, whatever code it is, you write it into a an IDE, right? And then you take a compiler, and what the compiler does is it takes whatever code you wrote, let's say Python, it takes that Python and it converts it into ones and zeros that the computer can read, right? It takes this English syntax that you have and it converts it into ones and zeros. Now, if you make a change to your code, what that compiler does is it rebuilds everything again, right? It takes all those ones and zeros and or sorry, it takes your Python and makes it into ones and zeros again. Um, for us, one of the innovations that we have is we understand the code that you wrote. And so if you make a change, we don't have to change all the ones and zeros. We can change just a small portion of it, or we can just change what's necessary. This is really important in data because if you write software, I mean, how many lines of software can you possibly write? 1,000, hundreds of thousands? I mean, maybe a million if it's a huge team. Right?
Sure.
That's actually not that bad. But in data, if you make a single change, you can go touch a billion rows of data, and that's just you shouldn't do that. If you only need to touch a million rows, you shouldn't touch a billion rows. And so being smart about that is that semantic understanding. And that was that example that I talked about. If you add a column, we know that you added a column, right? Something like DBT only knows that you made a change because it treats things as gingified strings,
Yeah,
right?
and then rebuilds it all.
And it just rebuilds it all. It knows something has changed. It has no idea what, so it has no choice but to rebuild everything. DBT, I will mention DBT did acquire a company, SDF Labs, that will help bring some of these capabilities when they integrate those. When they integrate that technology, it's going to take a while. We think our method is better, but I will acknowledge that that is something that they will be able to do more of. And then the second advantage that we have is this idea of state, right? If you're going to be efficient, you have to know what you did before. If I want to add 1 day's worth of data to my table, I need to know where that table left, right? If I have to rescan or if everything, or if I have to rebuild the entire table, that's just a complete waste. If I have a table that has annual days worth of data, you can see this is already 365 times more efficient, right? Just adding the
Yep,
last day of data versus rebuilding the entire table to add a day's worth of data.
for
So,
sure.
and there are other things that we do as well, right? I would say um, proper unit testing, right, is another piece of is another advantage. The other thing that we also can do is we can run your SQL on any warehouse that you want. The semantic understanding part of our technology comes from parsing the SQL, which then allows us to transpile it. So if you write your SQL in Redshift and you want to run it on BigQuery, we can do that, and we provide all the validation. Um, if you have stored procedures on Microsoft SQL Server and you want to run that in Databricks, we can actually do that conversion as well. So these are some of the different reasons.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's good. And I think what I appreciate is you're using terms that I can understand. So I know that our audience will be able to follow along too. So let's dive into kind of the meat and potatoes of why this podcast exists is to talk about growth and scale. So I love how right before we started recording, you and I were chatting about the difference between being an employee at an organization, which is not, I don't intend to convey that, just be lazy at an organization, but where you can kind of coast, right? You can kind of just do your job, go home, come back the next day, do it again, go home. But as a founder, as a CEO, as a business owner, um, it's 24/7, right? And growth and scale and what's next is important to us. So how have you grown your organization? How are you growing your organization? And where are you getting your customers today?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of coast, it's I would, I wouldn't characterize this 24/7 versus not 24/7, right?
Sure.
I think when we were talking about coasting, uh, right? When you work at Google, I'm not talking about coasting as an effort standpoint, right?
Yes, correct.
You look at Google, whether or not your project succeeds, um, generally you'll have a job the next day, right? Google has
Yes.
money, and if you accomplish generally what you're doing and you meet expectations, right, you will have a job the next day. At a startup, y- y- I can work 24/7. I can put in all the effort, but if I don't figure out certain things, if I don't find the next stage of my business, get that next piece of acceleration, that next piece of growth, I don't have a job in 2.5 years, right? And so I think that's the burden of a startup. It's both exciting, but it's definitely a burden.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. It's a
fighting for
lot
your
to both.
survival. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, in terms of growth, I'd say right now, um, from a company standpoint, we closed our Series A about a year and a half ago. We're 28 people today. I don't think we need to grow that much from a people standpoint, because uh, i- in order to survive, it's really about finding that next stage of acceleration. The what is the critical problem that we need to answer in order to survive and de-risk the company and get to that next stage. And I actually think if you gave me 100 engineers today and they all worked perfectly efficiently, I don't know that that helps solve our problems. Right?
Okay.
The real questions for our company, for us to reach the next stage of growth, is to answer these questions about the ideal customer. Who is
Hmm.
that ideal customer? How do we message them? And what is the motion in order to 3x to 5x to 10x our sales velocity?
Hmm.
Um, that's not something that I can answer with more engineers necessarily. So,
For sure.
I think about growth right now, not in terms of people or the size of the company, but in terms of answering these core questions that allow us to drastically to get a step function increase in our sales velocity.
So let's dive into that sales philosophy. How are you getting your brand out there, your organization out there? What is, rather, what are some of those growth tactics for new revenue that you're going after?
So, in terms of that type of awareness and just getting ourselves out there, we are an open source company. So our open source project is called SQL Mesh. We have of course, commercial offering, Tobico Cloud, right? And so our sales pipeline really depends on people. The primary way that we get awareness is through this open source adoption, right?
Hmm.
SQL Mesh is free. You can use it. You can test it out, and we want it to be powerful so that it's useful and you'll use it. Uh, and so one is like the how do we get ourselves out there? Open source is one, and then the content and ecosystem around open source is another one. So that's being a thought leader in the space, posting content on LinkedIn, running a community, being present at different events. And that's largely a work of our marketing and our DevRel teams.
Yeah.
There's other things,
Yeah.
of course, we can do to get awareness, whether it's ad, cold reach out. But as an open source company, that open source community comes first.
I love that. And it's a philosophy that I ascribe to as well, which is a lot of, give before you get, right? Go out, provide value, be a resource for people. And then when they need something or need what you offer, they're going to seek you out first because you were there, helping them get to that point. So I love that. How about partnerships? Do you guys invest in any form of partnerships where, you're co-marketing or you're sharing customer information in the sense of like, hey, we've got this customer, be good for you guys, and vice versa?
Yeah, well, I think there's different types of partnerships that we've been going after. One is with product partnerships, right? And that's sharing customer lists, um, and just kind of sales referrals, right? Because someone who's looking at a BI solution might also want a transformation solution and vice versa. A tool there that a lot of people use in the industry is called Crossbeam. It just helps you share customer lists. The second area of partnerships is, I would say, system integrators, right? Trying to find those consulting firms. You have a startup or a company, they want help setting up their data analytics stack. We want that consultant to use our tool and to use our tool to help them solve the problems. And I think the third area of partnerships is on this hyperscaler side, right? I mentioned earlier that we have the ability to migrate people from warehouse to warehouse, right? So if you're on warehouse A and you want to get over to warehouse B, using SQL Mesh for Tobico Cloud will get you over there. Will get you over there in 4 to 8 weeks, as opposed to 6 months, right? And I think this is a particular piece of value on the stored procedure side, just for customers or for people who are on older databases. When you want to get to a more modern solution, something like a Databricks, your other option is to go work with something like IBM or Accenture, and they're going to farm out your stored procedures to an offshore team who's going to manually translate things. But we got software that can automatically move everything over. And so, yeah, that's how we think about partnerships, trying to get those channels going.
I love it. All right, let's a couple more questions, and then we're going to go into what I like, what is called the lightning round. But it's just kind of fun. Say the first thing comes to your mind. But I want to chat real quick. What's been one of the biggest challenges you faced in your career, and how has it shaped you, or how do you do business today?
I mean, I think the biggest. I'm not sure I can identify a single challenge, right? I feel like a lot of my career, at least today, has been shaped by the entire journey. I would argue that the biggest challenge I face is today, right? I haven't been responsible for something like this until today. Um,
Sure.
so there have been. It's hard for me to point out a single challenge, but every challenge that I faced along the way has made me who I am. Right?
I
If
love
you
that.
if you get more narrow, I can talk about different challenges that have shaped those experience, shaped that part of me. Right? But I can't think of a single thing right off the top
No,
of my
that's
head.
good. And I think that's a really good perspective too, is the biggest challenge is today because you've got to take care of today, right? Yesterday's already been taken care of. And so I like that thought process too.
And I kind of feel like if there was one thing I could point to that shaped me, I'd be more of a one-dimensional person. Right?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's awesome, and I think it's a great way to jump into the final section here. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, real simple, laid back. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind, and we'll go from there. You ready?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
All right. What's
Yeah, I don't
one
do too
tool or
well with caffeine. So
okay?
if it's coffee, I can have one regular coffee, but it generally stick with decaf.
Yeah, I think I'm immune to caffeine. I've had 3 coffees this morning, so I don't think that's a good thing. Uh, what is one tool or system you rely on to keep your organization running smoothly?
Oh, um, I mean, the first thing off the top of my head is Google Calendar, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I run my life off of Google Calendar. My personal stuff is on there too.
same
Um,
here.
right? I think that's an important one. The other tool would be Slack. That's just how we communicate. We're a completely remote company. I'm
Yeah.
based in the Bay Area, but we've got someone in Alaska. I have another person in New Zealand, and we got a bunch of guys in Greece. So Slack's
Wow.
a pretty good tool. We use Slack more than email.
Yeah. Oh, same here. I love it. All right. Favorite book, podcast, or resource that's influenced you?
Oh, I think a podcast I've been enjoying lately is it's called Cautionary Tales. It's
Okay.
it's basically historical disasters and the lessons learned from them.
Oh, that's neat. That my kids would love that.
So yeah,
Um,
there's one episode about a guy named Thomas Midgley, I think that's his name, but he basically almost destroyed the world twice. Uh, One was he invented CFCs and
Okay.
so nuts people had
Yes.
refrigerants, and
Yeah.
unfortunately it blew a hole in the ozone layer. And the other
Yeah.
thing he invented was leaded gasoline.
Awesome. The CFC guy, I think there's a YouTube channel, Veritasium.
Yes.
I think he's actually based in the Bay Area too. He did a whole episode on that guy. It was fascinating. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I like that Veritasium channel a lot. I watched the one on perfect numbers.
Yes, I haven't seen that one yet, but it's on my list.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I knew that Mersenne primes. Uh, I knew that there were perfect numbers in the form of Mersenne primes, but I didn't know that Mersenne prime that all perfect numbers discovered to date were in that format. So it was cool
Yeah,
to see that.
very cool. All right, couple more. One bucket list item you've already checked off.
Oh, bucket list item, man, that I've already checked off. See, this one's
Yeah.
hard, right? Because I feel like I I don't. I'm not sure. I guess if you have to ask me like on the top, if what comes to
Yeah,
first to my mind, I'd have to say soloing in front of an orchestra, which I've had the opportunity to do a number of times.
that's
So
neat.
as a high school senior, I was able to I played the Concertarian Violin Concerto with the California Youth Symphony. Was able to do that in college as well. Had a chance to play Mozart Sinfonia Concertante with another friend when I was in college. So that's been a nice experience. I'd like to do it
That's
again, but it's
incredible.
hard to find those opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. All right, I'm gonna do an ad hoc one that's not even on my list here, but I was reading your LinkedIn and I feel like I have to. What is your current record for you personally in solving the Rubik's Cube?
My single solve record is 12.43 seconds. So I think the amusing part of this is that my previous record was 12.75 set in 2008. And it's just, I got old and stopped cubing, but cubes have gotten better now, so I have a chance to beat my old records.
That's
My
awesome. Yeah.
average record, so that's actually a more representative of your time is what your average time is, and it's counted
Sure.
off of five solves where they trim the fastest and slowest. My current PR there is 15.59, and
Wow.
I'm working to try to get that under 15 seconds because if I can do that, I'll take the world record for the longest time it took someone to get under 15 seconds. I can't go for any of like the real records now. I can only go for the man, you're old records. So I'll go for that one.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. I've still got Rubik's cubes that I have not solved in and them 15 years or more. So you're good. All right, man. Well, Tyson, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. Final question: if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
So you can hit me up, Tyson at tobicodata.com. We also have a Slack channel for our open source community. Our team's really responses there, and you can meet all the other people who use SQL Mesh.
It's awesome. Well, thanks for joining the podcast, and for everybody else, that's a wrap of this episode of Scaling Smart. I'm your host, Billy Mitchell, and I want to thank you for tuning in to Scaling Smart podcast, where we have conversations with real people, real stories who have learned how to scale smart.